Welcome to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Lugo from Manassas Park PD in Virginia. He has over 25 years experience in law enforcement. And as the chief, he's really committed to public safety, organizational integrity, and strong partnerships with the community. Welcome to today's show, Chief Lugo. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course, I'm looking forward to it. So 25 years, did it fly by or does it feel like it's been 25 years?
It's flown by. It's gone pretty quick. Can't believe it's been over 25.
It's really interesting to me because I feel the same way. I feel like I blinked and I'm older today than I ever thought was possible. When I was younger, I never thought I would be this old. But, we have conversations with the younger men and women who are entering into this career today. And, they all tell me, and I don't know if you've heard the same thing, but they all tell me, they're like, oh, that's a problem for later, or, oh, I have so much time. I don't have to worry about it now. I have so much time. And then from our perspective, or at least my perspective, I'm like, just wait. It's going to go by faster than you think. And then you're going to blink and you're going to wish that you put in place some of those proactive measures now when it comes to wellness. Obviously, we're going to talk about a little bit about wellness today, but are you seeing kind of the same thing? Or do you feel like you felt the same way when you were younger of like, oh, we have so much time and here we are?
Yeah, definitely. I never thought I'd be near retirement age or even thinking about retirement so quickly. It just felt like it's flown by.
Yeah. And I think it's important to have those conversations, so the younger generation, maybe they understand that, because I try to think about when I was younger, I don't think you could have told me, like, I don't know if I would have believed it still, even if you would have said like, just wait, you're going to be old one day, or just wait, I'd be like, yeah. But do you feel like having those conversations, now that you are later in your career, maybe closer to retirement than, the beginning of your career, do you think that as leadership, it's important to have those conversations with the younger generation so that they can be proactive and understand that the things that they do today are going to set them up for the future?
Yeah, definitely. There's going to be a portion of this where we give advice to the new generation. And that's one of them, that enjoy your life. There's more to this job than just be coming to work, and make sure you're doing things not only out of work, because it's going to fly by. It's going to be big. One of the things that I wish I would have done differently would be to think retirement and start making those investments into the future, because it's gone quick. And if you miss that window, you're going to be, a little bit behind trying to catch up and set yourself up for retirement.
Yeah. I had someone the other day, they said, think with the end in mind. And I know that's so difficult, even now today where we sit thinking another 20 years down the road, I think it is hard to know where we're going to be. But I think in the context of your career and the career trajectory, it's a little bit easier because you can say, okay, we know that retirement age is this, after 25 years, depending on what state you're in, at a certain age or after a certain amount of time in the field, that you're going to be eligible for retirement. And so how can you work backwards from that? Maybe you don't know exactly what role you're going to be in or, what assignment you're going to be in. But I think you can work backwards and say, okay, I know that when I'm this age, I'm going to retire. And what do I want that to look like? I think that we can kind of brainstorm some of the qualities that you want to have or some of the resources that you want to have in place. So one of them you mentioned, like finances. How can you work backwards from where you want to be? So when you retire, what do you want that to look like? What do you want your savings to look like? What type of investments do you want to have? Do you want to have maybe, a pot of money put away for your future kids, even if you don't have kids yet? What does that look like? And then how can you work backwards? I think the same goes with physical and mental health. How do you want to feel when you retire? I would be shocked if I talked to someone that said, yeah, when I retire, I just want to feel really bad. physically, mentally, like I don't want to feel great. Everyone wants to get to the end of it. Everyone wants to feel good, for as long as possible. And everyone wants to be able to have another chapter after retirement and be able to move and travel and do the things that you like to do. So I think that it's a little bit easier in the context of a career trajectory, because you can say, okay, we know this is a timeline. What do you want to have in place? How do you want to feel? And then how can we work backwards?
Yeah, it's great advice. I mean, I think you brought up some good points there where we need to think as people in any profession. You got to think about, the future and what you're planning on doing and how you're going to make it. You don't want to struggle when you retire after spending 25 years working somewhere. So I think those investments are important. Your health is important because you want to be around, long enough to enjoy that part of it. And I think making those investments and thinking, counts. And if you're thinking about a family and stuff are important in setting aside. And I think we can get people to open their minds up to that idea and see that, it's not a big investment you should be doing at that point, but it's something that you can grow upon in the future. Yeah. So
I really like the idea of small actionable steps over time, because that compounds, right? And so I think you brought up a really good point of it doesn't have to feel overwhelming. If you start early, then 20 years from now, like it's going to pay off, right? And this could be as simple as, hey, like if you start early focusing on your physical fitness, it's easier to stay fit than to get fit, and it's the same like financially, like it's easier to save a little bit of money over time and be smart about it over time than to not do it and then get to the end and be like, where am I going to get all the money?
Yeah, over the years, I've always taken, anytime I got a raise or any increase in pay, I would take a portion of that and put it away. It's money now that I didn't have. I didn't count on it. So I've always done that. Like I put a little bit extra aside. I still make an extra money, but I put a portion of it away or invested in my, the 401k or something to allow me for that to grow a little bit. So It's not like you were just saying, it's going to be a big impact on you because it's not money that you were at the time we're having, you just got the money. So,
yeah, that's smart. And, I learned, I shouldn't say I was perfect out the gate. I definitely, when I was like 18, got my first credit card and was like free money, like just didn't know, because I didn't have anyone teach me any of that stuff. But, I learned to live below your means. And I know that that's a hard thing. We all want like the flashy things, we all want to feel like the work pays off, and we have the nice house, the nice car, all the things. Like I understand that. But I was taught pretty early, live below your means, not live within your means. And so to your point, instead of you continuing to like live, like you get a raise and now you're raising those means as you go along, you're staying where you were and you're reinvesting that. So I think that's really smart. The other thing that I always do, and I don't know if it's for everybody, but it's my thing. You can buy every fancy thing that you ever want used and no one will know that it's used.
That is true.
And it's half price. So, buy the truck if you have, the means to do so, but can you buy a used truck that maybe has some miles on it and it's a little bit less? Can you buy the used, fancy whatever, everything you can buy used and it's a little less and no one will know the difference.
No, that is true. And, people need to realize as you get older, you're going to have those opportunities to make those purchases as you get older in your life, not when you're younger, when you're starting off, it's expensive. You're kind of living paycheck to paycheck. You're trying to figure things out. But as you make more money, you get older, you get, wiser how to spend money and stuff. And I think those things you want, you'll get, but they're, you just got to work for it, and it'll come naturally. It'll come to you.
Yeah. Delayed gratification is so tough in a world where like we're so used to things happening instantly. Having that delayed gratification, I think is really hard, but I agree with you. It all pays off in the end as long as you're smart about it. So I did want to ask you, I know you kind of gave some advice on what you did financially, every time you got a raise, kind of put some of that away, but from a mental and physical perspective, was there anything that helped you to get through the last 20 25 years and kind of get through those stages of burnout?
Ever since the academy, they, and probably is across the nation, they beat into you physical fitness, being able to, withstand what's going to be thrown at you, keeping yourself an ability to handle things, because you never know what's going to happen. You never know what kind of incident you're going to be involved with. And I think that is in a way, and I didn't think about it back in the day like this, but I think that's helped with my mental health. Like that's helped with, my well-being, how to handle stress. And throughout my career, I've always looked at it that way. There was one thing that my field training officer told me one day, and it's always stuck with me from the beginning, is, your appearance matters to the public. And if you look like you don't take care of yourself, you could be facing somebody that wants to harm you because they feel they can harm you. They can feel they can take you over and do what they want to do. But they're going to think twice if they feel like you're one that can take care of yourself. And I'm not saying everybody needs to be to that level, but I think we all got to know our limitations, and we got to be able to know what we can and can't do. And why give an advantage to somebody else if there's something we can do internally to do that? And I think that's helped me throughout the years how to deal with it. When I got to chief, that was a different stress.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still stressful. And I was shocked how much stress there is in this job. But I've been able to manage. I've had to increase certain areas because what I was doing was not enough. So I think knowing that when you go into these things and building on it and say, okay, I need to do something different than what I've been doing. It's not working. I think that helps. But, you got to have those conversations. You got to either talk to a professional or your doctor and say, hey, what's going on? I'm dealing with some more stuff and get some advice. So that would be my recommendation, get some advice and keep doing what you're doing, maybe build upon, maybe talk to a physical trainer, and say, hey, what can I do to adjust my workouts and stuff like that? But I've always worked out ever since high school, all the way through schools, all my schools, and then, getting into law enforcement. So to me, it's second nature. I do it every day. It's comfortable to me. I like it. If I don't do it, I kind of feel like I didn't do something that day, but I know everybody's not at that level.
Yeah. I really like something that you just said. You said that your stress increased in the current position that you're in. And so you recognized that you needed to increase your wellness in certain areas, which I think is a really interesting statement because I think that's not normal. And I'm saying this in like a really, kind way. Like I'm actually being complimentary because I think that a lot of people, when we get really stressed, we start to let everything else go, right? We start to say like, well, now I don't have time, or I'm too stressed to do X, Y, Z. But you looked at it and said, hey, my stress is increasing, and therefore I need to work harder to take care of my wellness. And I think that that's a really strong statement to say. And it's not easy. It's a little counterintuitive, I think. I'm sure there are many days where you're like, I just want to be horizontal. Like, I just want to lay down. Like I'm so tired. But instead you're like, nope, I need to recognize that I need to work harder to take care of myself.
Yeah. And that's when I actually went and local gym here, and I talked to I hired a physical trainer, and I didn't go to the gym. He gave me the workouts, followed up on me, and that helped me. He gave me some new ideas what to do, how to, bring up my cardio, strength and stuff like that. So it's helped, and, I didn't have to do it like forever. I mean, I only did it for like a year, but, now I continue on, and it seems to be helping.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, you didn't have to do it alone. You mentioned a few times, like reach out to people, find resources, maybe have some sort of mentorship or accountability that's going to help to keep you on track. I think that we really underutilize accountability partners in certain ways. And this could be anyone. It could be a friend, it could be your spouse, a family member, or it could be a professional where you're reaching out and saying, hey, I just need someone to keep me on track. Because I will tell you right now, and this was, and to your point, I think that now that I have a consistency and have a routine, that I'm more self-sufficient. But definitely in the beginning, when I started working out, if I was going on my own, I was far less consistent than if I had a scheduled time with a trainer. If I had, or if maybe it was a group workout class and I paid for it and I booked it and I knew I couldn't get my money back, I'm less likely to miss that class because I'm like, I paid $20 for this class. Like I'm going to go and I'm going to do it. And so having some sort of accountability to create the consistency, which will create that long-term routine, I think is really valuable. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think that sometimes we all think that we got to do things on our own, but you can lean on other people to help you get there.
And there's so many resources out there now.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many things you can do. I mean, you can go online and look at workouts and see what people are doing. And I'm not in these chat groups, but I've heard of chat groups where people go in there and discuss workouts, what they're dealing with, which I think they're helpful. You know what I mean? And how to build up and muscle and your cardio and stuff, which is very important.
Yeah, and I even think that organizationally, you could find like an accountability buddy, or maybe a group of people who are wanting to, kind of focus on that. And, how can you hold each other accountable? Can you do things before, after work? Maybe you work the same shift. Can you schedule times, or maybe even just check in with each other and be like, hey, man, like, did you do that? I did the workout. Did you do the workout?
Exactly.
And like, maybe you're not doing it together, but like you are like set up on a routine and you guys talk to each other, and the person who's like, no, man, I didn't do it. It's like, all right, well, you got to step up, And so I think like finding people who are going to help to motivate you in a positive way, I think is a really good strategy. So thank you.
I would add, if you can't get that, buddy, write it down,
Mm-hmm.
write down what you're doing, what you did. And then because you're always going to look back to that day. Okay, now what do I do today? And you're always going to try to increase because you're seeing it, So that's helped me because I write everything down. Every workout, cardio, I write it down and I go back and see what I did the day before, the week before, and I try to increase on that.
Yeah, love it. So. Do you think that as a leader, it's your responsibility to lead by example when it comes to wellness?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing that there's nothing that I wouldn't do that my officers do. If just because I'm the chief of police doesn't mean I'm not a police officer anymore. Mm-hmm. So, I've come in on holidays and gave people days off. If I hear a call go out and there's help, I go out and do it. And I think that's how they see it, see me as an example that I'm not afraid to get into what they have to do. I'm still a police officer. And, we talk about it. I sometimes sit downstairs with staff and have lunch and we talk about going to the gym. We talk about, working out and what people are doing, talk about their families, how they're doing and stuff like that. So I think they see me at a different level and say, oh, I can't approach the chief. But by me doing that, I think it's helped because they open up to me and then they'll ask questions. And I got officers here that are advocate work, they work out. They're always in the gym. And I ask them for advice. Hey, what are you doing, for, like a routine or a workout? And they share that, they're like, oh, cool. And we have a gym here. I'll walk in there, start talking to the officers and they'll tell me what they're doing and stuff, which is, I think it helps. I think it shows that I'm part of the team with them and they can talk to me freely.
Yeah. It shows that you're human.
Yeah.
Yeah. I find it to be really interesting. And I've been guilty of this. I thought that the more advanced I became in my career or when I became the boss, that I had to give a certain perception of being the leader, of being the boss. And of course you are the leader, you are, in some ways are, in reality, the boss. But I thought that I had to have this separation, and I realized that we were the most productive and moving things forward when there was more of that human element to it, when there was more vulnerability, like when I got to know people and they got to know me, and I think that sometimes, and maybe it's just when we're younger, maybe we learn, through age and experience. But, I think I always thought like, okay, like if I'm going to be like, I got to be perfect and like, I have to give this perception, or whatever. And now I'm like, hey, like, this is me. Like, I'm going to be quirky. I'm going to, talk about myself. Like, I'm going to show who I am. And I have found that to be the most effective way to lead for my team personally. And I don't know if you feel the same way, but I think that it's relatable. It's like, to me, if I meet someone who's stone cold, doesn't let you in, doesn't really share anything, about themselves, I can't relate to that person. And so it's hard for me to want to follow someone when I feel like I can't relate to them. And so I have found that when you can relate and have that human element, it moves things in a positive direction faster. I don't know if you feel that way.
I feel that way. I think communication is key. People got to see you. They got to know who you are. Just because you're the chief or, you're the new supervisor doesn't mean you have to, separate yourself from your staff. I intentionally park in the back lot. So I come in through the bottom floor of the building. I hit every level all the way up. And, it'll take me 20, 30 minutes to get to my office sometimes because I sit there and talk to people. And I think if they can approach you, you're going to know how they're doing. You're going to know what's going on. And they're going to see you, like you said, for the person you are, and have that, bond with your staff and ability to be able to speak about things. And, and I've had people come up to me and tell me that they're having a hard time, that they're not doing well. And I think it says a lot for them to come and talk to me about that. So,
I think we talk a lot about ROI a lot. And every time we talk about ROI, we think about money, right? We think about investing money. What's the return on investment for the funds that are being put into a certain area? What you just explained to me was an investment of time. So you're investing, you're setting these intentionable actions, right? You're like, I'm going to park here. I'm going to be intentional about how I walk to my office. I'm going to invest my time into my team and have these conversations. And having someone come up to you and say, hey, I'm struggling with something and, what can I do? Or asking for your advice. That's a return on investment. That's the return on the investment of the time that you took. And I think that if we can continue to have these conversations, it opens up the realm of what does wellness actually really look like? How do you create a culture of wellness and care? And a lot of times that piece of it is time and attention. It's not necessarily dollars. And so there's a lot of things that you can do within the organization that don't cost any money. It just costs time.
That is 100% true, especially in law enforcement, because, some agencies, the pay is not where they should be. You know what I mean? And people have bills they have to pay, and I think we see a lot of turnover and people not getting into law enforcement because you're not doing it for the money. But there's no reason why you can't be compensated in a way that you can live. But I think those things help when you're retaining your staff, that they know they have a voice. They know they're part of something. They're not just a badge number, and, they do matter. And I think when we have that culture and the right supervision in place, it says a lot. We don't get these turnover rates of people leaving to go to other jurisdictions for a few dollars more or significant raise because they like the culture where they're at and they feel like they belong.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I've had a handful of conversations with other chiefs and leadership across the country who have said that the younger generation aren't necessarily looking for the highest paying job. They're looking for an organization that's going to take care of them and their longevity. And so by having that conversation of like, hey, maybe we pay a few dollars less than our neighboring agency, but we're going to take care of you. And here's how we're going to take care of you. I think that speaks volumes. Obviously, there's going to be some people who are bouncing around. We're seeing it happening where there's a lot of lateraling and people kind of chasing those extra dollars. But I agree with you. I think that a lot more people are looking at a work environment that is going to be conducive for longevity. We know, we've had so many conversations about the reason people leave the organization, and a lot of it is the culture within the organization. It's the toxicity or the stress organizationally where a lot of people are leaving. And so when you can focus on creating that space where people feel valued and taken care of, then the numbers should support retention.
Yeah. And we've seen that here. We're experiencing that here. So we've been fortunate.
Good. I love that. Yeah. How do you motivate people to be proactive? That's a conversation we have all the time. It's like, we can have these conversations, you can provide all the resources, but how do you get people to take action for themselves?
I don't think it's at my level. I think it's people get motivated by their peers. To me, it seems like, you know what I mean? They'll see me. I'll go out. If I see a violation, they'll let me get on the radio, and everybody's coming to help me. I don't know why, but I think people get motivated by their peers. When you have good people around you that are working, and you have certain leaders in your department, and they see that, because we're not out there every day. When you get to a certain point in leadership, you're not out there answering calls. You're not driving around with these officers. So I think peers, they kind of set it, how people are, how they handle the workload and how they respond to calls and stay productive.
Yeah.
Like if you have an officer who's very traffic, that loves traffic, and it just kind of spills into, them to say, hey, I got to go do something. This officer's doing something. So, kind of motivates them to be more proactive. So, But we also have directives, we push it out and make sure we got problem areas. We try to put more officers in there on foot and stuff like that. And I think that helps with being proactive and showing that, hey, we're looking at the stats, we're looking what's going on. And when we get, crime spike in a certain area, and we kind of put all our resources there, they see that, and the officers, get motivated to go in there and start looking for stuff. So.
Yeah, I like that you said that the motivation is peer-to-peer. I've seen this. So I have seen a lot of dynamics where leadership is really supportive of these things and is pushing out a lot of the resources, the conversations, and the stigma is from a peer-to-peer than it is from like peer to leadership. And so I can see exactly what you mean, that motivation and demotivation can happen from a peer-to-peer level. And so I think it's a really important reminder that you don't have to have a specific title to be a leader. And how can you lead by example and motivate people in a positive way? You're either going to be on one side or the other. You're either going to be the person who's like judging everybody and, spewing negativity, or you're going to be the person who's creating more positivity and uplifting people and motivating people and setting that example. And so, anyone who is listening, you don't have to be chief of police to be a leader and to motivate people and to be that example. And I think that sometimes we forget that. And so I think it's really interesting to see that. I'll walk into a briefing room and I'm like, wow, all right, like you guys are, you're setting the tone here.
No, it's true. Yeah. It's amazing when you start seeing it, when you see people step up into that role. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Well, and I think that it's a snowball effect. Like you really start to see it. And I think it can happen in one way or the other, right? Like when negativity becomes the majority, you start to see that snowball effect of how that impacts everything. And then the opposite is true. When you have that really positive culture, it's a snowball effect, so that the people who are kind of maybe negative or not all about it, they become the minority, and the majority are people who are trying to make a positive impact and, trying to keep the positivity higher and the productivity higher.
Yeah, I agree.
You told me a couple of things that you guys are doing organizationally, but I want to highlight one of them. And then if there's anything else you want to add, I'll let you do that as well. But I thought it was really interesting because I don't talk to a lot of police agencies that have partnerships with their fire department. It's always like opposite sides, the banter back and forth is hilarious. I think it's really funny. But you guys did a partnership with your fire department for some wellness initiatives. What did that look like?
So the fire department always, they always do these annual physicals for their firefighters. They're required by the state, and they have to meet certain criterias in their physical abilities. And those results actually are reported to the fire department. And, and there's nowhere you can't, because it's medical, that you're not reported. No, they report if they're fit for duty or not.
Interesting.
And we were talking to them about, because this agency was not doing annual physicals. So we wanted to do annual physicals. So they have this company that came out of Florida, and we partnered up with them, and it has been successful. This physical, it covers from your blood work to your mental health, pretty much everything. They do a full body scan. It was very impressive, all the stuff that they offer. And all these results are then sent to the officers, and then they can follow up with their primary doctor. And it's been very successful. I was shocked that we waited this long to do something like this. I mean, there is a cost to it, but at the end of the day, I think if you can, especially if somebody's got something going on that they're not aware of, and you can find that early, then you can't put a price tag on that.
Yeah.
And I think our city manager here agreed, and he's been very supportive, and it's helped. And, it has that mental health part of it too, which is very important, because it does ask you some questions, about your health. And if you're depressed or dealing with stuff, but it takes the officers, our staff, because I do all staff. It's not just police. So professional staff, dispatchers, they all got to take the physical. They don't have a choice. And I think it's helped because it shows we are a department. We're not just, police over here, dispatchers over here, professional staff over there. So we are required to take the physical. And I think it shows that, we care about your health. We care about your well-being. And by partnering up with the fire department, it allowed us to, be able to make this work. And, I got to keep my hats off to them. Normally we don't do that because of the fire department, but it's really helped us out. And I think I'm glad that it was presented and we were able to move forward on it. So
I love that. So this was mandatory. You were like, everyone's doing it.
Yeah. So initially you get pushback.
Sure.
So I didn't do it initially mandatory. Well, the fire department's mandatory. Mm-hmm. And then I was getting, information that certain people weren't doing certain tests and stuff like that. So we discussed it with HR, legal and stuff like that, and our policies, and we checked it. And we said, they told us we can do it mandatory. So that's what we did. You don't have a choice to say, I'm not going to participate in this annual physical. You have to take it.
Yeah. I think
a lot of people have come around that were kind of first, I don't want people to know my business. I don't want people to know, my blood work and all that. Well, it's not us. This is a medical, company that's doing this. So, and you get the results, they're yours. They're not, they're not the department's.
Right.
And I think a lot of people have changed their minds about this and realized the benefits of these type of physicals every year.
So you saw some pushback in the beginning and maybe some fear, or people are like, I don't want people knowing my business. I don't want the agency tracking it. Yeah. Then you created a policy where it's mandatory. Yeah. And then afterwards, people were like, okay, thank you.
Yes.
This was actually really helpful. Mm-hmm. I think that education and awareness are really powerful. And it is scary, I think, especially with medical stuff. I see it when I talk to people, I'm like, wait, why don't you go? And these are maybe friends, where, they found something serious like cancer. And I'm like, well, don't you go every year and get checked for these things? And they're like, no. And I'm like, why? And they're like, because I'm scared or I just didn't think about it. And so I think that there's maybe a little bit of fear of knowing if there is something wrong, but it's power. As soon as you know what's going on, especially if you can catch it early, now you have the ability to get in front of it, before it becomes something that's, maybe too late, and you can't cure it or take care of it. And so I appreciate you saying that, because I know a lot of leadership are scared to mandate things, but for you to say, hey, like we had pushback too, but we did it anyway because we saw the importance and we had really positive results because of it.
Yeah, no, we've been very, very fortunate. And I think there's nobody in this agency can say that they would get a physical like that through their primary care. Because half the tests they do, they were not even approved by the insurance. They wouldn't even submit for it.
They're checking for specifics for public safety, right? I think we talked about this, that there's like some specific tests that the normal primary wouldn't do. But because you guys are in law enforcement, the first responder profession, there are certain things that they're looking for, like markers that they're looking for, right?
And one of the ones we added was the lead testing. Because, we shoot a firearm, we're in ranges. So we do the lead testing for our officers too, which your doctor's not going to do that unless they find something in your blood work.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. And is this company nationwide or are they only local?
I think they're nationwide. They're based out of Florida, but they're nationwide.
Okay. Well, maybe if there's anyone who's listening who is interested in that, they can reach out to you and kind of get some more information, because I know that blood work is something that a lot of people are looking for. But if you found someone, a provider that you had positive results with, then maybe someone can reach out to you and you guys can have that conversation.
And, one of the things I would add is that they come to you. You don't go to them. This company comes to you, sets up, and we normally do it at the fire department. And it is a 4 to 5 hour day that you're in there getting this done.
Wow.
And it's a stress test. They go over all your body scan. They go over, your blood work. All that stuff is talked to by a physician's assistant, and they discuss everything that you went through.
And do you pay for them to do it? Can they do that on duty?
Yes, we pay for them to do it. Yeah.
Wow.
So we make them come in. If they're off, they get paid.
Wow. So there's no hurdles at all. It's like,
there's no reason
you're
to say,
getting paid to do this. Like they're coming to us,
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. I know we're kind of, button up on time here, but one of the things that you said to me that really stuck out was that speed is really important when it comes to wellness. You said problem to solution timeline. Can you talk a little bit about that and what you meant?
What was the question? I'm sorry.
You had said that speed is really important when there's a problem. So you said that there's a problem to solution timeline. I wanted to see if you can maybe explain a little bit more about what you
remember in what content. What was related to? Do you remember? Or
I think when we were offline, we were talking about wellness and how important it is, maybe if there's a critical incident, the speed at which you get the resources,
yes.
or, I think we can even take this in the context of, blood work, getting that preventative, proactive, and the speed in which you get the resources that you need.
Yeah, I think it's important. We can't just sit around on it. It could be, if it's a critical incident and we're trying to get somebody be able to talk about what just happened. I think, we can't just sit on it. There's got to be some urgency. There's got to be some speed to it. We got to figure out what's going on and get to the root of it. We can't sit on it and wait. And the same thing with, with these medical, annual physicals we do. People probably walk around not even realizing they have, something wrong like cancer or their blood work, something's could be flagged and they have no idea. And I think, doing these mandatory year things and then you kind of put under the gun, hey, I got to look into this because I just did the annual physical and I got to go to my primary doctor. So the speed there, it has to be there. You got to be able to move quickly on these things and get the help you need. So
yeah, I agree. And, I think we see time and time again, and I'm going to put this in the context of, maybe a critical incident, and everyone kind of just being like, I'm good, I'm fine, we're good, and not dealing with it. And obviously now the conversation's different. Now there's, post-critical incident resources, there's debriefs, there's a lot of things that are happening that didn't happen in the past. But I think that a lot of times we almost convince ourselves that we're okay and we don't need certain things. And so we let it sit. And I read this book and it was talking about almost like a wound. You get a cut and you don't clean it out and it just kind of festers. And what can happen over time, and infection starts to spread. They're being really graphic about like what happens if you don't. But what happens if you did and you cleaned it out really quick and you put some Neosporin on it and you're good to go, right? And so it's this idea of not letting things fester and turn into bigger problems long term. How can we get in front of it? Understanding that no matter what career, especially in your career in law enforcement, you guys see so much more than the normal, I'm going to put in quotes, like, person in a public facing job is going to see: traumatic event, stress, all the things that you guys see. How can you understand that that's a reality of your career? How can we also understand that in addition to that, there's life and life stresses that happen? And how can you get in front of it and be more proactive and preventative? And when things do happen, like you said, that speed to addressing it so that you can move forward without it festering, without it becoming a bigger issue later on. And so, I think that is maybe difficult for us, especially maybe when you're trained to like suck it up. But I think these conversations really help to understand, hey, like you're going to get bumps and bruises. You're going to get some cuts along the way. You know, how can we just make sure that you have the things that you need to be successful long term?
When I started in law enforcement, and probably the majority of the chiefs you've interviewed and sheriffs probably, but that was never talked about. You did your job and that was it. You couldn't complain about what you just saw. You couldn't say, hey, how do I deal with this? It was not. But I think now we've come to this point in at least in this time frame now that people do talk about it. It doesn't have a bad stigma to it anymore. It doesn't say, oh, you're not allowed to talk about mental health. You're not allowed to talk about, what you just experienced. And I think when we allow those conversations to happen, we've had some incidents here, and I know I probably bothered the officer several times. So I called him all weekend. Hey, how you doing? How you holding up? Do you need anything? And it kept telling me, no, I'm good. I'm good. Almost like quit calling me. But when we and I was shocked on this one. We had an incident here. And we normally do one-on-ones because, you get the people to open up. It was recommended that we do a group because we were getting pushback. And I was surprised how many people showed up from the incident because it wasn't mandatory. It was recommended you come in, and everybody showed up. And I was worried that if I was in there, they weren't going to say anything. But I was shocked how many people stood up and talked freely, how they were feeling, how it was bothering them, how they were not sleeping. And, are they allowed to talk to their family members? They were asking questions. Am I allowed to talk about this? Am I allowed to share what I experienced with my family? And I think it says a lot when people feel that they can talk about it freely like that, which is probably not going to happen in every incident. But that really showed me that, communication is key. And we got to allow our people to say something and not not be penalized for speaking out, And I think it says a lot that these officers, and it was even professional staff that were in that meeting, and there was a therapist there. And even she said, I've never experienced that before. I couldn't believe that staff was able to just talk freely among themselves, and I left halfway through it, and the conversations got deeper of how people felt.
Yeah.
Would I get that result every single time? Probably not, but I was impressed how well it went. And I think it says a lot for, who works for this agency and the people that are around you. And like we talked about, your peers, you have that trust in your peers that you feel free to talk about. So
I think it goes back to what we said before about ROI, the investment that everyone within the organization had made in themselves and in each other to be able to communicate normally allowed them to communicate during a time of need. And so, it's the reps that happen before the event that you can then fall back on. That'll help you. I think it's really interesting how we have our own limited beliefs. And I love when we're surprised by it, because I've done this plenty of times where I'm like, man, it's not going to happen because of this. And it's like, well, is that true? Or is that just what I believe? And I have heard chiefs say, I don't sit in on these debriefs because they won't talk. And that was maybe your opinion too. We were like, man, maybe they're not going to open up if I'm there. But that wasn't the case. It was maybe a limited belief of like them not, wanting to do that. But then it was quite the opposite. So I think it's really interesting for us to be challenged a little bit in, our thought processes.
Yeah, because when I went in there, I was just going to, say a little couple words, let them know that I'm here for them. They need anything, and why we're doing this. And I went through my whole spiel, and then the questions started coming out, and then they started opening up, and I was shocked. But, and it worked out. If I had another incident, it would be the same? Probably not. But I was happy to see that result. And we did follow up with them, which I was not part of, and it seemed to help. Over time. So
yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I know you gave some words of advice in the beginning, but I do want to ask the questions. You can add to anything you'd like. But for that younger generation, the younger men and women who are entering into this career today, what words of wisdom would you share with them?
That it's a job. It's not your life. I see a lot of these new officers come in there, and this is all they want to do. You gotta disconnect. You gotta disconnect from this job. Things are happening around this profession. We see it all over the news, whether we're affected by it or not. You got to give yourself a break. Believe in yourself. Treat people like you want to be treated. And I'm not talking about a criminal that's just, you're fighting. I'm talking about 90% of the calls that we handle is not criminals. It's people that are in need, and treat them with respect the way you want to be treated. If you don't know something, let it go. Don't be afraid to ask questions. That was one of the things I learned in my career early on, that I was told by a field training officer: if you're in a position you can't, you don't have a lifeline to call and figure out what to do, let it go. You catch them another day. Don't get yourself in trouble because you feel like you have to take action. I think that's pretty much it. And this job is about integrity and have it, and that's something that's nobody can take away from you but you. That's your integrity matters. And if you decide to let go of your integrity, that's on you. That's not anybody else. And I think if you hold yourself at a higher standard, you'll have a successful career in law enforcement. And enjoy your life. Take vacations, please take vacations. Whether it's just a drive somewhere, every year I try to go somewhere and disconnect. And I love going places where my cell phone doesn't work. So, so that'd be my advice to somebody coming into this career. And don't be. This is a big one. Don't be afraid to try new things. Because in my career, when I started here, never in my wildest dream I thought I'd be chief of police. Never thought I'd be in K9. Never thought I'd be an investigator or a supervisor. And any challenges or opportunities, I won't say challenges, any opportunity that presented itself, I considered it. And I'm glad I made those changes because I think it made me a better officer and it made me a better leader. And I think that would go to my newer officers. You never know where life's going to take you. You never know where you're going to end up in law enforcement. Don't have regrets. Don't be afraid to try new things. That'd be my biggest advice.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on here with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.